introduce themselves shortly. So I quickly want to talk about FAMM and FAMM's Clemency campaign. So right now, FAMM is doing an incredible clemency campaign, asking our leaders across the country who are able to do clemency at the state and federal levels to do what they can to embrace clemency, especially those who are lame duck governors or the president, people who have the opportunity to really make a difference before their time ends in office. And so we're really excited to talk to folks today and to encourage folks to embrace this campaign, share the campaign, and talk to our leaders about embracing clemency. So clemency is an act of mercy. It is one of the most incredible things that is built into our legal system. People who have a criminal conviction can seek clemency from our leaders. Tonight, we're talking about state clemency. So people who have convictions at the state level are able to seek clemency at the state level from usually their governors or a board, and they can basically forgive them of that criminal conviction, which is a wonderful thing. Clemency consists of commutations, which can shorten a sentence, and it also consists of pardons, which can actually forgive a person completely of those legal ramifications of a sentence. So we're really excited tonight to talk about clemency and all of the things that clemency can do at the state level. So our three panelists tonight are absolutely incredible, and thank you so much for spending your time tonight. Tonight we have Professor Aliza Kaplan, who is the director of the Criminal Justice Reform Clinic at Lewis and Clark Law School. We also have Anthony Jones, who is an Illinois state clemency recipient and community educator for the Illinois Prison Project. And we also have Bethany Hall Long, who is the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Delaware. And we are so lucky to have all of you. If each of you could take a few minutes and introduce yourselves and what brings you to this work around clemency. Let's start with Anthony.
Thank you. It's great to be here with everyone, actually. And Professor, it's good seeing you again. What brings me here, actually, I would say in 1992, I committed a criminal offense, and which led me to prison. I was sentenced to natural life plus 30 years at the age of 20 years old, and was never even actually thinking as far as that I would be able to be released out of prison. After serving approximately 30 years of that sentence, I filed a clemency petition to our governor in Illinois after exhausting all my legal remedies other than executive clemency. I filed that, and my first time out filing one for my own behalf and sending it out, I was granted a clemency by our governor. And I've been out, and that was in July 28th of 2021. I've been out for like 3 years, and I basically, because of what I've been through and the men that I've left behind and the women that I've known while I've been out, as far as that are inside serving time and long sentences and natural life sentences, I've dedicated my life to helping people get out of prison and ultimately be relieved from those harsh, draconian sentences given to them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. It is an honor to have you here. Being able to talk about your direct experience with incarceration and the clemency process is going to be so critical in this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. Lieutenant Governor, would you like to introduce yourself and what really made you passionate about clemency?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you to FAMM and what you all stand for, your work against mandatory minimums, the work of advocacy, and following Mr. Jones. There are no words that any individual, a policymaker, can make when you follow someone who's lived that experience and had that opportunity, whether it's a clemency, a commutation, a pardon. My quick background really is one in which I serve in the state that gets to chair in Delaware, the chair of the Pardons Board. So it comes from an elected position. However, my real passion comes from 4 decades as a population public health nurse, someone who has worked through community, in equity, understanding behavioral health challenges, trauma, acquired childhood ACEs, all of those contributed factors to what ends up with persons having some experience with justice and justice involvement. And so for me, I've been super proud, and hopefully as we talk this evening, I can share with you some of the bold steps that I've done collaboratively with members of Delaware's General Assembly to be a role model in the nation on how to move the needle, so to say, in improvements to allow second chances. So chairing the Pardons Board, we have that opportunity to allow for increased numbers of pardons for second chance, and also for consideration of commutation. I will say now, and I'll probably say it 2 or 3 times tonight, some of the most important things we've been able to do is decrease the wait time, improve the process to allow persons to be considered for a commutation. We've increased that by 86%. And the number actually of commutations allowed in the past 7.5 years since myself as Lieutenant Governor, Governor Carney as governor, we've actually increased the number of commutations around 196%. It hasn't been easy. It's been intentional. There's been some work that we've put into that effort, but we have a lot more work to do. And again, thank you to folks such as FAMM for working collectively with elected officials, with advocates, and I look forward to answering questions over the next hour.
Thank you so much. And we're so excited to hear about those challenges that you came across, but also the things that you were able to do in order to make such a big change. I'm so excited to hear from you. So thank you so much. And Professor Kaplan, how about you?
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'm in my car because we had a parole hearing and it went a little later than expected, so I apologize. And I'm not driving. So I am a professor at Lewis and Clark Law School out in Portland, Oregon, and I run a clinic called the Criminal Justice Reform Clinic, and our focus is on what I call the back end of the criminal legal system. And one huge part of what we do is second chance lawyering, parole, clemency, prosecutor initiated stuff. And we represent individual clients, we change the laws, we do just about everything in this space. Back in 2017, myself and one of my students at the time, who then became a staff attorney in the clinic, wrote a law review article basically asking our governor at the time, Governor Brown, Kate Brown, who had just got into office, we basically argued for her to use her executive clemency to address issues caused by mandatory minimums. And she actually read it, and we spent 2 or 3 years doing presentations to her staff, educating all the people around her, till eventually she started, becoming tentatively interested in clemency. So after about 2 or 3 years of that, she started really looking at cases, and we worked on them like crazy. By the time Governor Brown left office, a year and a half ago, she has done more clemency than any governor in the history of clemency, including over 100 individual commutations that were lifers, over 100 individual pardons. When I say lifers, I mean people with 25 years to life. She did thousands of commutations with regard to old marijuana convictions. She did thousands of clemencies for people who lost their driver's license because they couldn't pay their fines and fees, another aspect of clemency. She commuted our death penalty, and my favorite one, because our clinic was involved in, she commuted all 72 individual youth who were convicted in our adult system, and she sent them all for a parole hearing at 15 years, which put them in line with the new law that our legislature had passed. So lots of clemency happening here, and I'm really proud to say that I know, and Governor Brown has credited my law clinic with, really moving her on the issue. So very proud of our work. And the reason I do this is because of people like Anthony.
Thank you so much, Professor. And I think, the last two folks, right, we highlight the importance of lawmakers who actually understand and listen, right? And so that makes such a difference because we have so many people in power who, as we will talk about, because clemency does not happen in many places like it's happening in Oregon, like it's happening in Delaware. It is not happening in so many places like this. And so while this is so wonderful, we want to make sure that folks understand this can happen, right? There are challenges, but when lawmakers care and they take clemency seriously, they can actually make a huge difference. You know, Lieutenant Governor, I want to go to you first. One of the things I think is so interesting that you mentioned in your introduction was how you have a background in public health and how that really helped you understand why people might even get in the system in the first place. Did your background in public health, you know, help you really understand that people might misbehave, but at some point we need to end the perpetual punishment and embrace those second chances?
Yes, absolutely. You know, and it was so inspiring now to hear about Governor Brown's work. So I will say she's been a mentor to me. So it's kind of ironic, right? So policymakers, we do share policy stories. So before I forgot to give her a shout out and to give, you know, Director Kaplan a kudos and a high five for that work in Oregon. It can be transcontinental. So let me just directly answer your question. Absolutely. I think all of us who work in the justice involved community understand every individual has a different story, a different background. But yes, my public health background, my nursing background makes a huge difference in my understanding, particularly behavioral health, AKA mental health, substance use disorder, co-occurring. We know that trauma-induced acquired childhood exposures, ACEs, along with systems of substance use disorder, along with issues of mental health. Absolutely, that has played a significant role in my sharing with other colleagues who have the Board of Pardons constitutionally here in our state of Delaware, our Secretary of State, our Treasurer, our Auditor, our Chancellor, my being able to share that. So to the advocates listening in, to the FAMM members, you know, as you're able to link data and as you're talking to members of your parole or your pardons boards, your governors, your elected officials who make those decisions, it's really important to be able to bring in those critical need wraparound services and why they actually matter. And so for me, it was one in which I saw individuals who had served their time, that additional time served was not going to change. They had paid their dues, so to say. I hate even using that description, but for their crime. And it was time for them to have that new opportunity. And that's why in Delaware, we again did move the needle where we increased commutations heard by 86%, 196% increase in the number of persons with commutations, and our pardons numbers also, those timelines diminished significantly, and we're able to return persons to their family, to the community. And so having persons share advocacy with information on causes and treatment, the appropriate treatment and the appropriate reentry, that should start for corrections. You know, that's why we call it correction, so that people could have those corrected behaviors.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really think it's interesting when people come to clemency and justice and, you know, get elected from different backgrounds. And I think it's so wonderful that you're able to apply that background in public health and nursing to what you're doing now. I think it's so important. And I think, you know, when we talk about personal experience with clemency, I want to go to Anthony. You know, while you were incarcerated for 30 years, which, you know, I think is just absolutely outrageous, right? But you were incarcerated for 30 years. You are an incredible member of society. You've been able to come home. You work to do whatever you can to help the people who are still incarcerated, the people who are in the community. I want you to talk a little bit about your experience applying for clemency and what that was like.
Well, actually, just the concept or the way that you go about applying for a clemency inside state-ran facilities, prisons, is, you know, it's somewhat really something that you don't see too many people wanting to do that. The process was very complicated. You actually have to, it's just costly financially for people that are in prison already that's trying to survive off just their basic needs. But there was, it's a financial burden because all of the things that you have to do as far as copies and sending things to the court, that was done actually via mail. So to go through that and the process of even trying to get over to the library in a state facility to get help when they're understaffed, sometimes daily going into the library could be cut off solely because one of they're understaffed as far as with security because an officer didn't show up. So they would, and instead of putting instead they had to decide where they would put officers for their location. So they would close down, certain things like the law library, the library, certain things like that, where people couldn't even have access to it. So just the whole concept of even trying to work your way up to file a clemency is so complicated. Many people, even when you look at it, you don't see too many people that actually have gained, relief through a clemency. So, and especially when it comes to, you would hear what people that had maybe small cases, or if you had a violent case, you rarely seen someone would get a clemency for something like that. So just to be hopeful to have the, to be hopeful too that you will actually get it granted after spending so much of your resources, and I'm asking your family to send you money to file these things, you just don't, you lose hope in filing one. So it's really not too much of a hopeful thing for people to file them into really, and unfortunately, until really till COVID hit. When COVID hit, you seen, a lot of things, they were beginning to try to change up things and get a lot of the prison population that was elderly at the time already to get out as far as on other ways because they were very susceptible to the harms of COVID. So that's when you begin to see a lot more people beginning to file clemencies. And ultimately, that's around the time that I was able to get out. But I see so many people that's actually still there. And, I think when you see cases like myself or other people throughout other states that actually have gotten out through clemencies, there exists a little hope there for people, but not much because of what we see. We don't see too many people getting relief from for these executive clemencies.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really want to talk to Professor Kaplan now about the things that you've seen across the country that might be providing folks more hope when they're applying for clemency. We heard from Anthony about, it takes long. It's costly for folks. Folks aren't feeling hopeful because they're not seeing a lot of people get clemency. What have you seen as far as trends or standout states that are doing as much as possible to help reduce the burden on people who are actually applying for clemency at the state level?
Okay. Well, first, I want to stress that clemency for state convictions is different in every state. What the process is, if there's an application, what's required, and all of that. And so every state has a different process, and it varies also sometimes by governor. The governors are the decision makers, and so when a new governor comes in, recently we have a new governor, and then there was a new application, and this governor doesn't know all the things that we did to educate the last governor, so we're back at square one again. I also want to stress that even though the issue becomes incredibly politicized, as we see all, nationally and in various states, certainly in ours, that it doesn't have to be that way and it shouldn't be that way. And so I don't want people to think of this as just, I know there's a huge effort with lame duck governors, and that's good because they don't have the political pressure. But, some of the people who have done the most clemency historically are not all Democrats. So I don't think we should fully give up on, piquing all governors' interests. And so what I'm seeing across the country is, as Anthony mentioned properly, is that, around COVID, there was so much of an interest for governors to find ways to limit their prison population because so many people were dying in prison because of the close quarters. And I think clemency was used by many governors to find, a portion of people and release them a little bit early. So, I mean, obviously when there's, a big medical thing, hopefully we never have to go through that again. But, what I do think some of the lessons that can come from that are that people suffer serious medical conditions while in prison. And that is a really interesting and important population for all of us to look at in our states. And it leads me to say, when you're thinking about clemency in whatever state, you don't have to start thinking huge, like let all the lifers out, start small. Think about whether it's people that are aging and costing the state a lot of money, whether it's people that, doing pardons, people who are already out and there's no safety issues, asking governors to forgive old convictions so they can move forward in their lives and get their civil rights back and get better jobs and all of that. So what we're seeing across the country is, I think, the post-COVID interest in clemency kind of went like this, and the pendulum somewhat swung on criminal justice issues. And now we're sort of coming out of that, right? And the election is behind us. And so we have sort of an open window to look forward. And I think it's a really great opportunity to start the process of educating our governors. And that can look different in every state, depending on who the decision makers are. Some states have a board you have to go through. Some states go directly to the governor. And again, they all have different processes. So I don't think there's any sort of post-COVID trends yet. But I do think that we all need to be a part of creating those trends. And like I said, we had this tremendous amount of clemency in Oregon. I don't foresee that happening again, but I don't feel like that means that our current governor can't or won't be open to some kind of clemency moving forward. And, it's our job, just like with the last governor, because we care about this, to start educating. And educating also means bringing people into the prisons, meeting with people, that we do all of that. And you have to do it for people to understand, like the lieutenant governor does, because most people just don't get it. They don't get that there's people like Anthony in prison that don't need to be there anymore.
It's very true. I'm glad you mentioned how important it is to bring people into prisons, to see that people like Anthony are there. I mean, it's so often that we're in rooms and communities where there's so many people who have served time for, some serious offenses, but are home and nobody feels scared, right? Because they're incredible people who are giving back to our communities. And we have so many people still waiting for their opportunity. And, again, I want to thank Anthony for being here, because you do highlight, all of the amazing things about what we want to see, right? We want to see people thrive when they come home. We want to see people giving back. And so, again, I want to just thank you for being here. So, Lieutenant Governor, I kind of want to talk about what clemency was like whenever you came into office, right? So I'm blown away by the fact that you said more Delawareans have been recommended for and granted clemency in the last 8 years than at any point in the last 3 decades. That's incredible. So I'd like to know, what was the state of clemency in Delaware when you took over? And what was the first thing that you thought you wanted to change?
Wow. Well, there was a lot to change. And the one thing, being someone who had been in the legislature prior, I'd been a member of the House and the Senate, and, you collaborate. So there were tiers, right? The first thing I wanted to do was change the process. Because again, we had to be more functional, quick results for how applicants were. But in addition, simultaneously, and I think this is common among many of us women who problem solve multiple tasks, we had to make sure our legislature was moving forward. And so collectively, it's not done singularly, working with collaborative relationships with members in our legislature to be simultaneously doing things like clean slate, changing expungement processes, working collectively through our behavioral health consortium, doing the mental health, doing the wraparound. So again, it was kind of casting that broad net simultaneously surrounding that pardons board. But at the Pardons Board, we had an antiquated, longer process. And thank goodness the staff and other colleagues who serve with me on that Pardons Board were willing to take a chance. So we began to streamline what used to be a long, lengthy process for individuals to actually get their applications reviewed. You know, I was quite concerned when I took over and saw stacks of papers of persons who've been waiting 2 years or more to be heard. And these are lives. And so what we were able to do is come up with a process, which I won't get into the weeds of tonight, but we'll be happy to do so if anybody wants to contact me or the Delaware Department of Parole, not Parole, Pardons Board. I would be happy to go through. And basically, in essence, we were able to come up with a process where each month I pretty much doubled, quadrupled the number of cases that we could hear. During COVID, we did not put more persons out. We did not grant more clemency just because of COVID, but more clemency occurred because of the change in our process. And we kept the Pardons Board rolling during COVID. We also changed, for me as a professor of nursing, we allowed alternative providers beyond psychiatrists to provide their mental health eval. As Professor Director Taylor indicated, each state's different. And I'm sure Mr. Young, when he talked about how expensive it was in the process and the attorneys, we made sure that we were providing for persons a more reasonable cost, a quicker evaluation by an equally competent provider, and making sure that persons had connection to others who could assist them. You know, I still have a short dream list of some things that I wish every person who was going for a commutation automatically had an attorney. I also will answer later, if there's an opportunity in the time, some of the thoughts that I have around future focus where we can address those aging populations of persons with chronic pervasive mental illness. There are things that we in this health systems where we should be doing some other provider changes for inmates who have serious issues, and we Medicaid matches, and there's things that we could be doing differently. So process change, doubling the application, making sure individuals had opportunity for expedited mental health reviews, lower fees for them, and just making sure that the office was timely in response. And before they would take a day or two, a month or two off, there were no times off, there were no days off. And so we just leaned in, and that's how we were able to really, really up almost by 200% the number processed.
Well, that's just incredible to hear. You know, I used to serve as the Secretary of Board of Pardons in Pennsylvania, and I am sad to say right now the current wait time is about 5 years from application to merit review before they see the board. And these are like, oh, go ahead.
They reached out to Delaware, Pennsylvania. So we're going to be
very, very glad. And it's wonderful. This new administration seems to be extremely good at reaching out to other states who are doing amazing things, because as you know, Anthony said, these things take time and these things take money. And, you know, as you said, Lieutenant Governor, these are lives, you know, and every single application is a life. And I'm really, really interested to hear about these procedural changes that you instituted. And Anthony, you know, I think I want to know from you, you know, as somebody who went through the application process in Illinois, you know, as somebody who knows people who are going through the process, other folks who have been approved, people who have been denied, you know, what is the thing about the clemency process in the state of Illinois that you would have changed in order to make it a better experience for yourself and also for the other people who are applying? You're breaking up a little bit, Anthony, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, there's so many things that I think that would need to be changed here in Illinois. One of the things, really, the whole process as far as the petition. The petition is being used throughout the throughout IDOC, Illinois Department of Corrections in Illinois, is I think outdated and speaks toward the offense and not the person, as far as the person, the humanity of the individual. We know people make mistakes. You know, people have different backgrounds and upbringings. So I think one of the things that need to be focused on is the person and not really the offense, because for that will never change. The circumstances against an offense will never change. Another thing, as far as having that feeling, as far as that the hopefulness of you have so many people now that have truth in sentencing in Illinois and other things that are staying in prison because basically of the time that they were the percentage of time that they're having to do. At least prison.
I think you're starting to break up again, Anthony, a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, while we wait to get Anthony back, I want to talk to Professor Kaplan a little bit about kind of the ideal clemency system, right? If you could build one of all the different clemency systems that you have seen across the country, what would an ideal clemency system and process look like at a state level?
It's such a good question, and I think there's a debate about. I know, the two models that you mostly see are clemency that goes right directly to the governor and their staff. Maybe it's the general counsel of the governor, or they have a specific person that does clemency, or someone in the governor's sort of inner staff circle. And then in a lot of other states, you see more of a board, like a parole board, but sometimes it is the parole board that cases have to go through and before, on the journey to the governor's office. And sometimes it's just a specific board or committee created, for clemency. After, doing a lot of research on this, my personal preference, and it's not just because this is how we do it in Oregon, but it's to go directly to the governor. One, I feel in some ways you're just trying to convince that one person. The power lies with the governor under the state constitutions. And if the governor wants to set up a committee or a group or something, that's their prerogative. Before Governor Brown was in office, our governor here had no interest in clemency, so we did them in Washington State, which is, not too far, and it had a board. And, that board, I felt, really got in the way of us speaking directly to the governor. I always felt like if I could just talk to the governor, in these petitions, the person would have a better chance. And I don't know for sure, but I felt like often you then hit or miss with a group of 3, 5, 8 people versus one person with the governor. And you can spend time, really working on an individual a lot easier than I think you could on a board. Also, a lot of these boards have a lot of former law enforcement, which isn't automatically a negative, but really can bring people that aren't looking at rehabilitation, which is what clemency should be about. As Anthony mentioned, it's not that the crimes shouldn't be considered, but it's important that we really are looking at people. Have they changed? Have they transformed? What does that look like? And every governor is allowed to have their own process of that. I guess I also kind of like the idea that if I'm with a governor that isn't interested and I try everything and I try to educate them and try to bring them to prison and try to do everything, and then it doesn't work out, then I get another governor to try again. But finally, I'll say, the power of clemency lies with, it's a constitutional executive power. And it lies with the executive of each state and the president, obviously. And I just really think that's the person who is best to communicate with on this. But, other models definitely can work as well.
Thank you so much. So I want to go to Lieutenant Governor again, and I want to ask you, you talked a little bit about the challenges that you faced in getting some of this work done. I'm sure it's not just, easy all the time to, really embrace clemency. what are those challenges that you face, I guess, with the General Assembly, but also with members of the public? We all here embrace second chances and love second chances, but that's not always the case with folks who are in our communities. So I'd love to hear about those.
Well, and I so appreciate, Director Kaplan, her comments and what Anthony is saying, because there are different challenges, right? And I respect like her decision with the experience of going directly to a governor. And I can see, yes, sometimes that's easier. The good part, to kind of answer your question directly and give the counter to what has worked effectively in this one exception in this one state with the board. The board does have, it's constitutionally based, and it's 3 elected, officials and 2 appointed officials, a cabinet secretary. And I think the biggest, challenges have been, one, making sure that we had the staffing and the resources in place to process everything and to bring systems up that were antiquated. And then breaking down barriers, educating and working with law enforcement, correctional officers, all persons involved. Delaware has become much more of a trauma-informed behavioral health reoccurring state. And those messages and those educational opportunities have made a difference. And that is one of the areas that, yes, was a challenge at first, but was something that was over time has really helped to move the needle when individuals understand that in our mental health system, around 80% of those persons, and this is Bethany's anecdotal observation, have a co-occurring mental health serious disorder or trauma-informed issue. It helped us to begin to get the necessary resources. Challenges have been that correctional process, making sure that the individuals have the opportunity to get all those tools. And I think that's every state. And I'm sure the director and Anthony probably lived that experience, right? Making sure people have those things that are required, whether it be drug and substance rehabilitation, whether it be making sure that we have life skills, making sure we have the housing. Those have been the different challenges that sometimes have held up systems. And, certainly special issues of certain crimes. But again, making the shift to improving the number of commutations. It took me 4 years working to get a gentleman who had been incarcerated for 47 years, making sure they have the resources. And the final thing I'll say is there is a push, I know nationally, to make sure that persons with life sentences do eventually get the opportunity, for parole, particularly as they are aging out and have different health issues and challenges. So again, it's that multi-tiered level of making sure we have those resources and the process and coming up with solutions like the mental health evaluation, which was a real stopgap. And when I discovered it's because we were requiring psychiatrists only, we were able to open that up and really make a difference.
That's really great to hear. I love how you highlighted how, people who are justice impacted, it's really an intersection of so many different parts of our government, our community, our systems that are all impacted by this. And I think it's so important that you've really taken a holistic approach, right? Not just to clemency, but to looking at people, right? And I think I want to go back to Anthony, because one thing I thought that was so profound that I think we all agree with is that clemency should be about the person, right? Not about the offense. Obviously, the offense is a consideration that's, people are applying to have their offense looked at. But what they're saying is, do I deserve mercy at this point in my life? When we think about how we are as people, we all have the capacity to change. We're all very, very different from who we were when we were young. And so it's wonderful to, expose people who are in positions of power to people like Anthony, who was convicted at a young age and spent 30 years working to make sure that he was able to get a second chance in a position where, sentenced to life, right? That gives a lot of people a position of, I have no hope. So I want to really commend you, Anthony, also, and so many other people who are serving long sentences who, without a sense of hope that existed in these legal mechanisms still continued to make sure you were living the best version of yourself every day. And so I want to go back to Anthony and talk a little bit about your experience while you were incarcerated, people you met who might still be fighting for that second chance, who you believe should be here with you serving in the community. Did you experience a large group of people who were incarcerated with you who deserve to have the opportunity to have a second chance?
Now, and one of the things that I go in front of our board and say that there are many people worthy of this second chance, more so than me, that I've met. Men that actually molded me and guided me and educated me, that would tell me to, you know, someone would even give me a word a day and would tell me that by the end of that day that I would have had to have the definition and use that word in a sentence. And that was a part of an education that I would receive from some of the people that motivated, inspired me. One of them is, that I can think of, is Gasai Pitter, a very close friend of mine. He's he's a brother to me, and guy, you know, and our family.
I think you're starting to break up again, Anthony, but I'll pick up about Mr. Pitter, who Anthony just mentioned as someone who is so deserving of clemency. And see, I mentioned to our panelists earlier, I have tissues because I am sick, but also I usually cry at these events. And this is probably where it's going to happen. But Mr. Pitter is the father of a dear colleague of mine, Alexia, and he deserves to be home. She has lived most of her life without her father, and that's not fair. So thank you for mentioning him, and thank you for shouting him out, and he deserves to be home.
Yes.
If you can, Anthony, give everybody who is tuning in a message of hope, because I know a lot of our audience tonight are people who have loved ones who are serving these incredibly long sentences, mandatory minimums, terrible old law sentences, who need an opportunity to come home, but they've been denied clemency. They live in a state that does not support clemency. Can you give those folks a message of hope?
Absolutely. I actually I'm to natural life, and he's of education. He's
Anthony, I'm sorry. I was going to say, you just broke up again. Oh, I want to hear everything you have to say. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can move to a different corner of the room to give that message, because I know it's going to be so important to so many people on this call. I know they want to hear that. In the meantime, while you're moving to a different area, I want to go back to something that was highlighted by, I think, everybody on our panel, which is looking at different populations of folks who should be considered for clemency. I live in Pennsylvania, another sister state, New Jersey is also doing some great work on clemency and looking at categories of people who are incarcerated who are able to seek expedited clemency. And one of those has been mentioned by the lieutenant governor, by the professor, and by Anthony, which is aging populations. I would love to hear from each of our panelists before we go to a couple different questions from our audience. If there was a group of folks, whether it's people who are aging, people who are sick, that you could suggest to either governors, to boards, people who are seeking clemency and who are over clemency. If there was a population of people, what would you say would be the biggest population that you would like to see be given expedited access to clemency? Lieutenant Governor, how about you first?
Yes. Well, I think it's one would obviously be persons who are aged or chronic health. Because again, you could be a 50-year-old with kidney dialysis and multiple chronic health conditions. So I think persons with chronic and multiple health conditions who have served their time, who are no risk to society, if they've had a violent crime, murder one, or whatever that might be, allowing them to either return to supervised setting, to home, to provide the clemency is critical. And in the interim, if there is a transitional period, states really should look to, working collaboratively with long-term care, with their hospital systems, where they can actually get full, and some states I know do get Medicaid matches internally to prison, but if not, they really should be doing that. And to me, the other population, which we can talk about later because I don't want to hog the conversation, is chronic pervasive mentally ill persons who are not sociopathic or extremely violent, who may have the opportunity to return to community with clemency or a transitional setting at a state psychiatric facility. Those are persons that I feel often don't have voice. And that has been a very important lesson for me and others, that people don't know how to articulate, they don't have voice. And so to FAMM, to advocates, to these organizations who are standing up for persons who are voiceless, thank you. Because sometimes it's how we can reach and teach and articulate. And for a person who has been incarcerated for decades, they don't have the tools, they don't have the skills. And so many of you are the only light of hope for those individuals. And again, these are persons who are not violent, who should be returned, who should be granted second chances. And again, I always reiterate that to board members, to persons who, can't be light on crime. I'm like, no, these are well-meaning individuals who should return to community. Those persons who need to be behind bars, stay behind bars. But there are so many individuals that need clemency and need to not have minimum mandatories as your organization fights for.
That's so right. And I think it's so smart. And I'm so glad you understand that, because a lot of folks who are in positions of power do not understand that clemency is not a get out of jail free card. That does not mean that if you embrace clemency and second chances that you're going to just open the doors and let everyone out. There is always a process. There is always a way that folks, have to apply. They have to show that they are ready to come home and be a part of the community. Anthony, hopefully you're back in good service. Lieutenant Governor Halong was just talking about, hope. Can you give us that message of hope, please?
I'm back with the organization. And as I was saying that my director of education, Ronaldo Hudson, was serving on death row, and his sentence was commuted to natural life, and then it was commuted again by another governor that has him out here now doing amazing work. I work with so many phenomenal men and women that have served decades in prison, and to me, when you see someone actually myself, well, that's why we need to uplift our stories and to let people know that, that you could, I never thought that I would be here. I never thought I would be here. But I know if I can be here, you can be here. And we're going to continue organizations such as, my organizations and, FAMM, that we're going to continue to fight this fight and, and to get you home, because you deserve to be here. And definitely we are, we're going to do what we can to fight to get you there.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And, you make it all worth it. As you said, it's so smart to be able to, share your stories, and you deserve to be in this conversation just as much as Lieutenant Governor, just as much as the professor does. You deserve to be here and be elevated for the incredible person that you are. So thank you so much for being here. We have a few questions from our audience that I want to take a few minutes to ask. First, we were asked, how long does it normally take for a clemency? Now, I think it has been pretty clear through the answers that it varies state by state. Clemency processes vary state by state. So take a look in your state and see what the timelines are. A lot of times there are websites that will tell you how long it could take. You can give them a call. People like the Lieutenant Governor have done incredible work to make the timeline shorter for people in her jurisdiction, but that's not happening everywhere. So take a look at your jurisdiction, your state, and see what the clemency process is like. And then hopefully you can find out how long it takes. And then they were also asking what documents have to be submitted with the application. Again, that will vary state by state. But I want to ask Anthony, what did you think was so important whenever you applied that really helped show who you are as a person? Not Anthony Jones, what the conviction was, but Anthony Jones as the person who deserves to be a part of our community out here. What are those documents that you submitted with your application, and what would you suggest people make sure they put in their application to make sure that either the governor, the board, whoever it is that's taking a look at it, understands who they are?
Things that require by each to put in. I think one of the key things is really share your story, share about who you are, and I did that with mine. Which I wrote my own personal letter to the PRB and the governor to express who the person I am today and the regret and the remorse that I felt from that. And this wasn't anything that was on the document other than, you're sharing your remorse throughout, but I wanted to personally put that letter together. I'm so grateful that I'm able to have that. Of course, you have a disciplinary record. I would suggest that if you don't have a bad disciplinary record through any facility that you're at, then send it. But if you don't have one like that, but of course, when you first come into the system, it's basically a cultural shift. Yeah. And it's, everything, I tell people it's like bizarro land. Everything that's up is down, down is up. And so I had coming and getting into that new culture, on just work, know that to be there's zero.
You're starting to break up again, Anthony. I'm sorry. Usually it's my Wi-Fi that causes a problem for things. But so Lieutenant Governor Hall Long, we have a question for you. How many of the folks granted clemency in Delaware have reoffended after exiting the system? Do you have any good statistics on clemency recipients and their success?
I do not have the direct number and data point, so I don't want to misquote. But I imagine the last time we looked at it was very similar to some of the national statistics. I mean, it was under 20%, I believe, but don't quote me on that. I just know that we've worked really, really hard to continue programming, but we have a lot more work to do. We're not perfect. Mm-hmm. All states and jurisdictions. We need to continue to really put those resources in the community to help persons continue to be successful with housing, employment, and all the social determinants.
That's a wonderful point. And I think that's a really good thing that we all need to advocate for as community members, that when people come home, we are able to make sure they are supported and have things that they need in order to thrive and succeed as wonderful members of our community. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. So we have a couple questions also that are state specific. I want to say for folks who are looking for questions about who to reach out to in your state, who to reach out to in your community, please feel free to reach out to FAMM. We can try to connect you with resources all across the country, in your specific state, wherever your loved one is. So you can always reach out to FAMM. We've got a lot of different resources on our website for you also. So please feel free to take time to look at the things that we have that can help educate you on clemency and then also help you advocate on clemency. We also have a question from somebody who is asking, is there a good chance with a murder case to get granted clemency in Pennsylvania? I will say, as someone who served in that office, Governor Wolf granted, I believe, 53 commutations of people who are serving life sentences. And I know we have a different administration now, but I know that I don't know the number right now off the top of my head. I believe it's around 3 to 5 in the first 2 years of folks who were given commutations. So look, please apply. I think it's so smart that Anthony mentioned tell your story, right? When folks are asking in the chat, asking these questions about what you want to bring with you, right? What documents you want to include, make sure they know who you are. If you have completed a class, if you have completed a workshop, if you participated in a group, if you've done anything incredible, make sure you include it. Put every single certificate. If you have community support from people who are ready to bring you home and welcome you home with open arms, have them write letters of support. Some places, it does take a while after application to actually get to see the board, the governor. You can always update your application too. You don't have to keep it from where you are immediately to where it is a couple years down the line. So you can always feel free to update that too. So quickly, I want to make sure that folks are able to give any closing remarks that they might like to say. We only have 4 minutes left. This conversation went so quickly and I've learned so much from each of you. And I want to thank you so much again. Lieutenant Governor Hull Long, I would love to hear from you as you close out. What do you hope for Delaware as you close out your time as Lieutenant Governor? You have done such incredible things. There are so many people whose lives are absolutely changed because of the work that you have done. So, what would you hope for clemency in Delaware after you leave office?
Great. Well, and I'm going to make it a little larger because I've served as the National Lieutenant Governor Association and nationally. So, and I know you have folks from all over the country who listen in and work with FAMM. And it's an honor to be here tonight with Mr. Jones out of Illinois and the work that Director Kaplan's done in Oregon. For me, it's the continuance of improving the processes, allowing persons to reintegrate sooner, to make the barriers broken down, to make sure persons are aging out of our incarceration, out of our systems, that they have death and dignity for those who are able to do so, and that also that those mental health services exist. I also want to propose for the clemency programs that, we really see this also as not only a workforce issue, but a quality of life, because these are individuals who are so incredible, who can participate, workforce across America. There's high demands. Persons need to be home with their families. And while doing all this, providing the behavioral health, mental health, substance use services. And ultimately, I think all of our goals would be, let's work really strongly with our children in education and prevention so that we're not in so many of these situations to begin with and provide the resources. So I'll stop there. I feel like I spoke a lot tonight. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. Thank you to FAMM and everyone of the work you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And Professor Kaplan, closing remarks. Again, thank you so much for all of the work you do across the country to make clemency a reality and educate so many important people about this issue and, bring people into prisons and all of this stuff and bring up the younger generation. Any closing remarks for the people who are listening in tonight?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to hope because I've been getting people out of prison for about 25 years. And if you would have told me, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, like all that my students and I've always worked with law students, all that we have been able to accomplish and how much criminal justice has changed. Sometimes it doesn't feel like, or it feels like 5 steps forward and then, 6 steps backward. But the truth is, in my 25 years of practice, so much has changed for the better, believe it or not. And I just think it's really important that I tell my students, I tell folks in prison all the time, we play in the long game here. And I know it's individual lives and it doesn't make any one individual feel better, but, you have to keep the hope, right? You have to live your life and you have to keep the hope because you never know. I said to a room of people at the prison in 2016, we're going to use clemency, and everyone laughed at me. I'm like, I'm going to get all of you out. And you know what? All but 2 people that were in that room are out. And a lot of them had life without parole. A lot of them thought they would never leave. And I just think you have to be hopeful. There's a lot of us working around the country. We're really all working on it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor. And to finish us off, because we are just about out of time, talking about hope and a beacon of light. Anthony, can you close us out with Your final words, please.
In someone that's viewing this in Illinois, you can reach out. We do workshops as a community navigator. We train people in as far as commutations to file these things. If you have any questions, you can go to our website, www.illinoisprisonproject.org, and just reach out, and we will come and train anyone as far as through this process. So thank you so much, and remain hopeful. Definitely.
Thank you so much for your time tonight, your expertise, and everything you're all doing to make this world a better place. Lieutenant Governor Hull Long, thank you so much for everything you've done the last 8 years. It is just incredible, incredible, incredible. Professor Kaplan, thank you for everything you do. I hope I see you in person again real soon. And Anthony Jones, my goodness, you are just incredible and such an example of why we do this work. You are why we do this work. So thank you all so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you everyone for paying attention. And please, please, please do your best to advocate for state clemency wherever you are. And we are so, so, so excited to see what we can all do together. Thank you all so much.